The invitation lay on my coffee table, elegant script on expensive cardstock. It was for my father's 60th birthday celebration, the one I had spent years meticulously planning. My name wasn't on the host list. I'm Amy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a daddy's girl, the one who believed that love given freely would always find its way back. I thought dedicating a legacy in his name, a scholarship, and at his beloved university would be the ultimate tribute. I never imagined that gesture of love would become the weapon used to try and erase me from his milestone. If you've ever poured your heart into something, only to have it snatched away by those you trusted most, you'll want to hear how this story unfolds, because what they didn't know was that some foundations are built too strong to be easily dismantled. My father, Richard, he's always been my anchor, even growing up, when I often felt like a satellite orbiting the warm glow between my mother, Eleanor, and my older brother, Mark. Dad was my true north. He had this quiet way of making you feel seen, truly seen. He taught me how to change a tire before I could legally drive, and he'd slip these little notes of encouragement into my lunchbox all through middle school, just small things. But they built a world for me. My mother, Eleanor, she was different. Not overtly cruel, not in a way you could easily point to, but there was a coolness, a distance with me that was a stark contrast to the lavish attention she poured onto Mark. Family photos from those years, they tell the story better than I can. Mark and Mom, arms linked, beaming. Dad and I usually standing a little off to the side, connected but separate from that central unit. Why can't you be more like Mark? That was the soundtrack to my childhood. Mark, a few years older, effortlessly met every impossible standard Mom set. Straight as, captain of the football team, just. Perfect in her eyes. And I tried. God, I tried. But my best was never quite enough to earn that same, uncomplicated approval. It created this quiet ache, this underlying belief that maybe I just wasn't as much, but with Dad, it was always simple. He was my rock. So, when his 60th birthday started appearing on the horizon, I knew I wanted to do something truly special. Something that would honor the man he was, the impact he'd had. Dad had spent 30 years as a history professor at Northwood University, his alma mater. He loved that place, loved teaching, loved the idea of knowledge being passed down. That's where the idea for the Richard Walsh Legacy Scholarship sparked. It wouldn't just be a party, it would be a lasting tribute. Something that would help students for years to come. All in his name. I'm a senior financial advisor in Chicago now, and my career has been good to me. So, for 2 solid years, I squirreled away money. Every bonus, every little extra, went into a dedicated account. I researched how to set up a charitable fund, the legalities, the endowment levels. I pictured a beautiful launch event at the university, coinciding with his birthday weekend, a tasteful dinner, key faculty members, maybe some of his distinguished former students. A celebration of his life's work, the whole thing. From the initial donation to establish the fund to the event itself, I budgeted around $55,000. When I finally felt ready, about 6 months before his birthday, I brought it up at a family dinner. I had a simple proposal printed out, outlining the scholarship idea, the potential for a small heritage center attached to the history department showcasing some of his research papers. Dad, his eyes just lit up. Like a kid on Christmas morning. Amy Bean, he said, using his old nickname for me, That's the most wonderful thing anyone's ever suggested. His voice was thick with emotion, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Mark nodded, looking genuinely impressed. Wow, Ames, that's a big deal. Dad would love that. Chloe, Mark's wife, chimed in about how meaningful it would be for the university community. Even Mom, Eleanor, seemed cautiously supportive. She asked practical questions about the university's involvement, the tax implications. Looking back, her questions were less about contribution and more about assessment. But at the time, I was so buoyed by Dad's reaction. I just felt a wave of hopeful relief. I left that dinner feeling like I was walking on air, already mentally planning the speeches, the catering, the small, perfect details that would make it unforgettable for him. I was so focused on the love I was pouring into it. I didn't see the first faint shadows gathering at the edges of my vision. The initial glow from that family dinner, it didn't last. Dad, bless him, remained my steadfast champion. He'd call me, bubbling with quiet excitement, asking about the progress with the university, offering to go through his old papers to see what might be suitable for the Heritage Center display. His enthusiasm was the fuel that kept me going, especially as other currents began to emerge. I threw myself into the project, countless hours on the phone with the university's development office, meetings with lauders to ensure the scholarship and was structured correctly, poring over catering menus and guest lists for the launch event. My apartment in Chicago became mission control. Spreadsheets, brochures from the university, timelines taped to my fridge. It was exhilarating, this secret I was nurturing for Dad. But my family's involvement, or rather their lack of it, started to become a subtle, annoying unease, Eleanor especially. Whenever I tried to discuss specific details of the event with her, Mom, do you think Dad would prefer a string quartet or a jazz trio during the reception? She'd suddenly remember a pressing engagement. Or she'd steer the conversation towards something smaller. You know, Amy, your father really isn't one for a big fuss. Perhaps just a quiet family dinner here, and you can make an announcement about the scholarship then. This, from the woman who threw herself elaborate garden parties every year that rivaled a royal wedding. The inconsistency was jarring. Dad was supposedly overwhelmed by a dignified university event in his honor, but Mom wasn't overwhelmed by her annual 100-guest extravaganzas. It didn't quite add up. Her smile. When we did talk about the scholarship, it never quite reached her eyes. It was a polite mask, one I was starting to see through more and more. Mark became increasingly difficult to pin down. Texts about coordinating travel for the event, or his potential role in giving a small speech, would go unanswered for days. When he did reply, it was usually a curt, "Whatever you think is best." Ames, sounds good. No engagement, no real input. Chloe, his wife, would occasionally send a vaguely encouraging text. "I'm sure whatever you plan will be lovely, Amy." But she never offered to help, never asked for details. It felt isolating. Like I was pushing this massive, beautiful boulder uphill, all by myself, while the rest of them stood at the bottom, casually observing. I remember one Sunday afternoon, about 3 months before the planned event. I'd driven out to my parents' place, armed with the finalized university agreement for the scholarship and a mock-up of the invitation for the launch gala. I was so proud, so excited to show them. I walked in, and the air in the living room was thick. Eleanor, Mark, and Chloe were huddled on the sofa, heads together, and they all went silent the moment I stepped through the doorway, that kind of silence. You know, the one that hangs heavy, telling you you've interrupted something you weren't meant to hear. "Oh, Amy," Mom said, her voice a little too bright. We were just discussing summer vacation plans. Her eyes flickered away from mine. Throughout lunch, whenever I tried to bring up the scholarship, the topic would be deftly, almost comically, redirected. Dad would start asking an interested question, only for Mom to loudly offer more mashed potatoes, or Mark to suddenly recall an urgent work anecdote he simply had to share. It felt coordinated, deliberate. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. This was for Dad. Surely, they wouldn't sabotage something that meant so much to him later. As I was gathering my things to leave, I stepped into the hallway to take a quick call from my office. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and I heard them. Mom and Mark, their voices were low, but clear enough. "She's completely taken over his birthday," Mom was saying, her tone laced with a familiar resentment I hadn't allowed myself to fully acknowledge until that moment. as if she is the only one who knows what Richard wants, or the only one who can do anything for him. Mark's reply was a murmur of agreement. I know, Mom, it's always been like this, hasn't it? Amy and Dad, in their own little world. We need to do something before she finalizes everything with the university. Your father deserves a proper celebration, something we plan. Not just her, grandstanding. My gift, mighty years of saving and planning, reduced to grandstanding. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen. The phone still pressed to my ear, the voice of my colleague a distant buzz. Was that how they saw it? This act of love, twisted into a selfish power play. I drove back to Chicago that night with a knot of ice in my stomach, the city lights blurring through orange tears. The shadows weren't just gathering anymore, they were starting to close in. The unease I felt after overhearing that conversation in the kitchen, it solidified into a cold dread over the next few weeks. But Dad, he was my compass. The morning after that awful Sunday, he called me, his voice full of genuine enthusiasm. Amy Bean, I was just telling Professor Albright from the classics department about the scholarship idea, and he thinks it's absolutely splendid. He even offered to help go through some of the university archives for old photos of my graduating class for the heritage display. His joy was so pure, so untainted. It temporarily pushed back the encroaching darkness. This wasn't about me versus them, I told myself. This was for Dad. He wanted this. That had to be enough, but Eleanor and Mark, they seemed to have a different agenda. A few weeks later, Mom called. Amy, dear, she began, her voice syrupy sweet, a tone that always set my teeth on edge. Your father, and I, and Mark, we've been talking about his 60th. And while your scholarship idea is very ambitious, we think something a bit more intimate, more family focused, might be more appropriate this year. We were thinking of a lovely dinner party here at the house, just family, close friends. You know how your father dislikes being the center of a huge fuss. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This, from the woman who orchestrated social events that could rival a state dinner. The lovely dinner party she was proposing was, I suspected, code for an event Eleanor controls completely. I tried to be diplomatic. Mom, Dad seemed really excited about the university event, and I've already put down significant deposits with the caterers, the venue on campus. Oh, deposits can be managed, dear, she waved it away dismissively. Financial concerns shouldn't dictate what's best for your father, and honestly, Amy, a big public event like that, it puts a lot of pressure on him at his age. He was turning 60. Not 90. He still cycled 10 miles every other day and out-hiked men half his age. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even, Dad specifically told me this scholarship and the launch event would be a dream come true for him. Mark jumped in on a conference call a few days later, his lauder mode fully activated. Look, Amy, we've all discussed this extensively, and the consensus is that a local celebration makes more sense for everyone. Dad might be saying yes to your big plan just to spare your feelings. You know how he hates disappointing people. The insinuation stung, that I was too naive or just self-absorbed to understand my own father's true wishes. That I was somehow bullying him into this grand gesture he secretly dreaded. It wasn't just about the event anymore, it was about them undermining my relationship with Dad, painting him as a frail old man who couldn't possibly want what I was offering. The tension became a constant, suffocating presence. Every family interaction was fraught. Passive-aggressive comments escalated into more direct opposition. I felt like I was in a surreal play where everyone else had the script, and I was just stumbling around, trying to make sense of my lines. I needed clarity, for Dad's sake and for my own sanity. So, when Mom texted me one Tuesday morning, Amy, can you come over this evening? We need to finalize plans for your father's birthday. A small, foolish flicker of hope ignited within me, finally. I thought, maybe they've come around. Maybe they're ready to genuinely contribute. How wrong I was. That evening was the beginning of the end. Or perhaps the end of the beginning. I drove to my parents' suburban home that Tuesday evening, a familiar tightness in my chest. Mark's Audi was already in the driveway, which was unusual. He rarely came over on a weeknight without a heads up. Another small red flag waving in my peripheral vision. The house itself, the familiar ranch style I'd grown up in, looked the same. But as I walked up the stone path, something felt off, colder, as if the warmth had been leached out of it. I let myself in, calling out, "Mom, Dad," in the living room. "Amy." Mom's voice floated back, a little too high-pitched. I found them all there, Mom, Mark, and Chloe, arranged in the living room like a tribunal. The conversation, whatever it had been, stopped dead the moment I entered. That weighted silence again, the kind that screams of pre-rehearsed strategies. "Where's Dad?" I asked, the first question that sprang to mind, noticing his conspicuous absence. "Oh, he's at his weekly bridge club," Mom replied smoothly. To smoothly, we thought it would be better too. Chat. Without him first, so we're all on the same page. Red flag number 2, blaring like a siren. I perched on the edge of the armchair, feeling less like a daughter and more like a hostile witness. Mom sat ramrod straight in her wingback chair, hands clasped primly in her lap. She took a deep breath, the kind one takes before delivering bad news. "Amy," she began, her voice carefully neutral, "we've been doing a lot of thinking about your father's birthday plans. And while the scholarship idea is interesting, we've decided that something local, something we can all manage together, would be more appropriate." More appropriate? I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Mark leaned forward, his expression earnest, almost condescending. "Yes, Amy, we've discussed it extensively, a large-scale university event. It's a lot for Dad, for everyone. We're thinking of hosting a beautiful garden party here instead, all his friends, colleagues, family, people who truly matter to him." The unspoken addendum, "and you're not in charge of this one," hung heavy in the air. The implication that my chosen way of honoring him somehow excluded people who truly mattered wasn't lost on me. I tried to remain calm, to reason with them. "But I've already secured the university hall, signed contracts with caterers. The invitations for the scholarship launch are practically ready to print. Dad is so excited about this. He's been practicing a little acceptance speech." "Your father is being polite, Amy," Mom said, her voice firming, the velvet glove slipping to reveal the iron fist. "At his age, the stress of such a public to-do, it's not fair to him. This garden party will be elegant, meaningful, and far less taxing." "He's 60, Mom, not 160, I countered, a tremor of anger finally seeping into my voice. "He's healthier than most people I know. He specifically told me this scholarship, this recognition from his peers and his beloved university, would be the highlight of his career." For the next hour, it was like talking to a brick wall. Or rather, 3 brick walls. Every point I made about Dad's explicit wishes, about the work I'd already done, about the money I'd already committed, was met with a united front of vague concerns about his comfort, his preferences, which they seemed to know better than he did himself, and the impracticality of my plans. Not once did they acknowledge his expressed enthusiasm. It was infuriating. It was heartbreaking. "Let's compromise," I finally said, exhaustion setting in. "What if we do both? The garden party here, for family and local friends, and then the scholarship launch at the university, perhaps a slightly smaller scale, for his academic colleagues, and to officially announce the fun." The glance that passed between Mom and Mark was instantaneous, and it spoke volumes. They had no intention of compromising. This wasn't about finding the best way to celebrate Dad. It was about them wresting control, will. "Think about it, dear," Mom conceded, though her tone suggested the matter was already closed. We should probably include your father in the next discussion about our party. Our party, not his. I left their house that night feeling disoriented, like I walked onto the wrong movie set. As I got to my car, Mark caught up to me. Leave, he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. His voice softer now that Mom wasn't present. Try to see this from Mom's perspective. She just wants to be the one to host Dad's milestone birthday. It's important to her. And the scholarship, honoring his life's work, isn't important to Dad. I shot back. Weariness making me blunt. Why does her desire to host a party outweigh his actual dream? He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Just consider the party idea. Okay, for family harmony. I nodded noncommittally, got in my car, and drove away, my mind reeling. Had I completely misread my own father for all these years? Was there some secret health concern they weren't telling me? Nothing made sense. That night, I did something I rarely did. I called Dad directly on his cell, bypassing the house line. Everything okay, sweetheart? He asked immediately, concern in his voice at the unusually call. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, about the scholarship and the university event. Are you still genuinely excited about it? Or is it too much? He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that instantly reassured me. Too much. Amy Bean, are you kidding? I've been boring my old colleagues with details for weeks. Professor Davies in the English department is already planning which tie he'll wear. Who on earth thinks it would be too much? I hesitated, not wanting to ignite a family firestorm. Oh, just some concerns I've heard. Well, you tell whoever is concerned, he said, his voice full of mirth, that this old man is more than capable of enjoying a little academic adulation and a good dinner in his honor. I'm counting the days, sweetheart, truly. His words were like a balm to my frayed nerves. This wasn't about Dad being polite. This was something he genuinely, deeply wanted. My resolve hardened. The scholarship launch was happening. The fragile peace from Dad's call shattered the next morning with a text from Mom. We've all discussed it further. The local party plan is moving forward. We can talk about your scholarship idea later. My scholarship idea. As if it were some fleeting whim of mine, rather than a carefully planned, deeply meaningful tribute to Dad that he himself cherished. I tried calling her, tried calling Mark, straight to voicemail. Brief, non-committal text replies, if any, the silent treatment. Mom's classic weapon when she wasn't getting her way. A full week of this emotional stonewalling followed. I oscillated between white-hot anger and annoying self-doubt. Was I being unreasonable? Was I the one missing something crucial? I reached out to Dad again, but his responses about the scholarship suddenly became vague, distracted. Something had shifted. He'd start to talk about it, then trail off, or Mom would conveniently call him for something in the background. The deadline for final payments to the university caterers and for the event hall was looming. I needed clarity. What I got instead was the beginning of the end, or so I thought. After that week of unanswered calls and evasive texts, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Saturday afternoon in late March, one of those early spring days that teases you with warmth before reality bites back with a chill. I drove to my parents' house unannounced. I even picked up a box of cannolis from Dad's favorite Italian bakery, a small peace offering, a subtle reminder of what this was all supposed to be about, him. As I turned onto their normally quiet street, my stomach clenched. Cars lined both sides of the road. My Aunt Susan's Volvo, Uncle Patrick's pickup, a dozen other vehicles I recognized belonging to extended family and close family friends. What was going on? No one had mentioned a family gathering to me. For a fleeting, cowardly moment, I considered just turning around, driving away. Whatever was happening inside, I clearly wasn't invited, but then something hardened within me. This was my family too. This was about my father. I deserved answers. I parked a block away and walked slowly towards the house, the pastry box clutched in my increasingly sweaty hands. Through the large bay window in the living room, I could see movement, a crowd of people milling about, clustered in conversation. I knocked on the front door, foregoing my key, suddenly feeling like an intruder. My cousin Ashley opened it, her welcoming smile faltering when she saw me. "Oh, Amy, I didn't know you were coming." "Apparently not," I said, keeping my voice neutral as I stepped past her into the entryway. The scene that greeted me stole my breath. The living room and dining room had been transformed. A huge, garish banner reading Robert's 60th birthday bash, June 15th, was stretched across one entire wall. My Aunt Susan was on a stepladder, precariously stringing up balloons. Uncle Patrick was in deep discussion with a caterer I didn't recognize. Mom's best friend, Debbie, was at the dining room table, addressing a mountain of cream-colored envelopes. Invitations, I realized with a sickening urge, invitations for their party. My mother emerged from the kitchen then, carrying a tray laden with coffee cups. She froze mid-step when she saw me. The expression that crossed her face wasn't guilt or even surprise. It was pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Amy," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging in my chest. I gestured vaguely at the organized chaos. What is all this?" "It's the party planning committee, of course," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "For your father's birthday." I looked around at the committee. It seemed to include every branch of the family tree, even distant cousin Martin from Albuquerque, but conspicuously excluded me. Several relatives glanced awkwardly in my direction, then suddenly became intensely fascinated by their coffee cups or the scuff marks on their shoes. Mom set down her tray with a clatter and gestured towards the kitchen. "Let's talk privately." I followed her, acutely aware of the sudden hush and the whispers that erupted behind us. The kitchen was a whirlwind of cake samples, floral arrangements, and catering menus. Evidence of extensive, secretive planning. Why wasn't I included in this? I asked, my voice low, trying to contain the tremor of hurt and anger. Mom busied herself arranging a platter of miniature quiches. "Well, dear, we didn't think you'd be interested, given your alternative plans." "My alternative plans?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean the scholarship and the university event that Dad has been so excited about for months? The tribute I've been saving and planning for over the years. Your father has come to accept that a local celebration here at home makes more sense," she said dismissively, not meeting my eyes. "He understands that at his age, all that fuss at the university is just impractical." "Did he tell you that, Mom?" I challenged, my voice rising despite my efforts. "Or did you tell him that?" Her eyes narrowed, the polite facade finally cracking. "You always think you know what's best for everyone, don't you, Amy? Always trying to be the hero, the perfect daughter, outshining everyone else." The venom in her voice startled me. This wasn't just about a birthday party. This was years of something ugly, festering beneath the surface. "This isn't about me," I insisted, my frustration mounting. "This is about Dad. It's about his birthday and what would make him happy." "What would make him happy?" she shot back, slamming a hand on the granite countertop, making the cake samples jump, "is having all his loved ones together, celebrating him. Not being dragged around to some ostentatious university affair that you cooked up without consulting anyone properly. The scholarship was always meant to honor him, Mom. The event was for him to share that honor with his colleagues and friends who respected his work." My voice was louder now, drawing the attention of the committee in the next room. I could feel their eyes on the kitchen doorway. "Why can't you just accept that the decision has been made?" Her voice rose to match mine. "We are having a party here. That's what's happening. And what about the scholarship, the university?" "There is no scholarship event, Amy," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Each word a poison dart. It's not happening. We all agreed, and frankly, you're not welcome at your dad's birthday party. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A gasp rippled through the relatives eavesdropping from the living room. Someone, Aunt Susan, I think, murmured Eleanor in a shocked, disapproving tone. But it was the smirk that slowly curled my mother's lips that truly shattered something deep inside me. That small, satisfied twitch of her mouth as she finally voiced the cruelty she'd apparently been harboring for weeks, maybe even years. I stared at her, this woman who had given me life, and felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness where a daughter's love should have been. Good to know, I said finally, my voice eerily calm, even to my own ears, without another word. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, through the living room now filled with staring, silent relatives, and out the front door. No one tried to stop me. No one called after me. Their silence was a complicit roar, confirming I was utterly, completely alone in this. In the sanctuary of my car, my hands were shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. The world outside the windows seemed to tilt and blur. That final, cruel pronouncement from my mother, "You're not welcome," echoed in my head, a relentless, brutal drumbeat. It wasn't just her words. It was the chilling satisfaction on her face, the silent assent of everyone else in that room. I had become an outcast in my own family, and no one, not a single person, had stood up for me. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of numb disbelief and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The Richard Walsh Legacy Scholarship, the beautiful tribute I poured my heart and soul into for 2 years, was dead. Killed not by circumstance, but by the deliberate, calculated cruelty of my own mother, aided and abetted by my brother and the silent complicity of my extended family. Once back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. I moved through the motions, a ghost in my own life. Then, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize amidst the pain. If they wanted to erase me, if they wanted to hijack Dad's celebration and my gift to him, then I would remove every trace of my involvement. I wouldn't let them taint it further. The first call was to the university events coordinator. I need to cancel the booking for the Heritage Hall for June 15th, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I cited unforeseen family circumstances. The coordinator was understanding, if a little surprised, given how meticulously I planned everything. The second call was to the caterer, deposits lost. Of course, but it was a small price to pay for severing that tie. The third, and most significant, was to my bank. I need to transfer the entire balance from the Richard Walsh Legacy Fund account back to my personal savings. I instructed the private banker. $56,300. The exact amount I'd saved. As I heard the click of the transfer confirmation, a strange mixture of grief and liberation washed over me. The dream I'd so carefully constructed for Dad was gone, but in its place, something else was stirring. A fierce, protective anger. Yes, but also a dawning realization that I deserved better than this, better than being the family scapegoat, the convenient villain in their twisted narrative. As I drove away from my childhood home that terrible Saturday, I'd sent one final text to my father, just 7 words. I love you. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't explain. How could I tell him that his wife, my mother, had just banished me from his life's milestone? Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked Eleanor's number, then Mark's, then Chloe's. One by one, I severed the digital tethers to every family member who had stood by and watched my public humiliation. Everyone except Dad. His line, I vowed, would always remain open. The scholarship dream was over. The fantasy of a loving, supportive extended family was shattered. But as I sat alone in my quiet Chicago apartment that night, the city lights twinkling like distant, indifferent stars, I couldn't have imagined how completely everything was about to be upended. Yet again, the doorbell rang late, a startling intrusion into my self-imposed isolation. It was Sarah, my best friend since college, armed with wine, chocolate, and a look of fierce loyalty. Your text sounded like a five-alarm fire, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. Spill it, all of it, and I did for the next 2 hours. The whole sordid story poured out of me, the planning, the subtle resistance, the ambush, Eleanor's final, devastating words. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to outright outrage. That's beyond messed up. Amy, she said, refilling our wine glasses, I always knew your mom was difficult, but this is a whole other level of psycho. The worst part, Sarah, I said, the wine loosening the tight knot of unched hairs in my chest, is Dad. He doesn't even know the full extent of it. They're making all these decisions about his birthday, his legacy, excluding me, and probably feeding him some sanitized version of why. So what now? Sarah asked gently, after a long silence. You've canceled everything, the university venue, the caterers, pulled the funding. I nodded, the reality of it hitting me anew with each item I listed. Everything, to years of planning. Gone in 3 phone calls. Sarah was quiet for a moment, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. Then she looked at me, a curious glint in her eye. What if? What if you still did something? Not the scholarship event, obviously, but something for yourself. With that money, the idea felt so foreign, so selfish after everything. I don't know, Sarah. The whole point was to give Dad this incredible gift. And that was incredibly generous of you. Amy, she affirmed. But maybe this is the universe, or whatever you believe in, giving you a giant, flashing sign to do something for yourself for once. When was the last time you took a real break? A real vacation that wasn't a rush-long weekend or tacked onto a work trip? I honestly couldn't remember. You've got the money sitting there, she pressed. You've already got the time off work approved for Dad's birthday week. You clearly need to get away from this family drama. Why not? Use this as an opportunity. Take that 56 grand and go do something amazing, something just for Amy. A tiny spark ignited in the darkness, a solo trip. Maybe research that ancestral village in Ireland Dad had always talked about, the one his great-grandfather came from. Not a grand public gesture, but a quiet, personal pilgrimage. I mused, the idea taking tentative root. A completely different kind of legacy, my own. Sarah grinned, sensing the shift in me. Exactly, sleep in. Drink wine at lunch, explore ancient castles, flirt with charming Irishmen. Whatever the hell you want, without worrying about anyone else's needs or preferences. For the first time since walking out of my parents' house, I felt a flicker of something other than gut-wrenching pain. A tiny, fragile flame of possibility, anticipation. We spent the next hour with her laptop, not booking anything concrete, but just exploring boutique hotels in Dublin, cozy bands in Galway, flight options. The more we looked, the more tangible the idea became. This wouldn't erase the betrayal, but maybe, just maybe, it could be a bomb. A way to reclaim something for myself from the wreckage. The next few days passed in a haze of numb routine. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I avoided looking at my phone, which was still blowing up with missed calls and texts from unknown numbers, probably concerned, or more likely, nosy relatives, alerted by Eleanor to my dramatic exit. I ignored them all. The silence from my immediate family, however, was deafening. It was a confirmation of their united front against me. Then, late Wednesday night, nearly 4 days after the party planning ambush, my phone buzzed with a call from an unblocked number I didn't recognize, but it was a local area code to my parents' town. My heart lurched. With a sense of trepidation, I answered, Amy. The voice was hesitant, strained. It was Mark, my brother. What do you want? Mark, I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth I might have once felt for him. Amy, God, I need to talk to you. I messed up. We all messed up. Big time. His voice was hoarse, emotional in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids, since before the layers of maternal conditioning had set in. Mom's been lying to everyone, including Dad. I sat bolt upright in bed, my blood running cold. Lying about what? Mark, be specific. About everything, he choked out. About you, about the scholarship, about his birthday. Dad never knew the full extent of what you were planning for the university. Mom intercepted your emails to him, deleted your texts about the scholarship details. She told him that you were the one who was being difficult, that you said you were too busy with work to be involved in any kind of celebration for him. She painted you as ungrateful and dismissive. The betrayal, already a gaping wound, ripped open further, exposing raw, new depths of pain. It wasn't just exclusion. It was deliberate, malicious deception designed to sever my bond with my father, the one pure, uncomplicated relationship I thought I had. He's been devastated, Amy, Mark continued, his voice cracking. Thinking you didn't want to be part of his 60th birthday, that you'd abandon him. And then, after you left on Saturday, she told everyone you had a tantrum and stormed out because you couldn't control everything. Why are you telling me this now, Mark? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because Dad found out, he said. Last night, he found one of your original, detailed brochures for the Richard Walsh Legacy Scholarship, the beautiful one with the university crest, hidden in Mom's desk drawer. He confronted her. In her story, it just started unraveling. The more he questioned, the more she contradicted herself. Then he called the University Development Office himself this morning. They told him about your generous pledge, about the event you had almost entirely finalized. He called the caterers you'd booked. He even called your bank. I don't know why, but they confirmed a large transfer out of a fund named after him just a few days ago. That's when it all blew up. My mind reeled. Dad knew. He knew the truth. Or at least, parts of it. Where is he now? I asked, the only question that mattered. He's at Uncle Patrick's cabin by the lake. Mark said he couldn't stay in the house with her after everything came out. He's heartbroken, Amy, not just about missing out on what you planned, but about Mom. About her manipulating everyone, turning the whole family against you, against him, a wave of emotion, so strong it nearly buckled me, washed over, relief. Yes, but also an even deeper sorrow for my father's pain. Amy, Mark said, his voice thick with a shame I had never heard from him before. I am so sorry. I was a blind, arrogant fool. I believed her. It was easier to believe her than to question. To see what was right in front of me. Can you meet us, me and Dad, at the cabin? He needs to see you. We need to. We need to figure out how to fix this. If it can be fixed, fix this. The words hung in the air. Could something this broken ever truly be fixed? I didn't know, but my father needed me. And for the first time in a very long time, my brother sounded like he might actually be on my side. I'll be there, I said. The drive to Uncle Patrick's lakeside cabin, a place usually associated with happy childhood memories of fishing and bonfires, felt different this time. It was a journey into the heart of our family's fractured reality. When I arrived, Dad was sitting alone on the weathered wind dock, his shoulders slumped, staring out at the still, gray water. He looked older, smaller. The vibrant energy I associated with him seemed dimmed. Dad, I said softly, stepping onto the creaking planks. He turned, and the look in his eyes, a mixture of profound sadness, shame, and a desperate, yearning love, broke my heart all over again. He stood up, a little unsteadily, and opened his arms. I walked into his embrace, and we just stood there for a long time, the only sound the gentle lapping of the lake water against the shore. Amy Bean, he finally whispered, his voice rough with unshed tears. Mark told me everything about the scholarship, about what you planned, about what your mother did. I just wanted it to be perfect for you. Dad, I choked out, clinging to him. The university, your colleagues, a legacy. He held me tighter. It would have been, sweetheart. It would have been the most thoughtful, incredible gift anyone has ever tried to give me. And I never even knew. We moved to the old wooden bench at the end of the dock, sitting side by side, just like we used to when I was a little girl, sharing secrets and dreams. Mark joined us a few minutes later, his expression tentative, uncertain. He sat on Dad's other side, completing an unlikely, fragile trio. For the next hour, the full, ugly story tumbled out. Dad, his voice filled with a weary sorrow, recounted how Eleanor had systematically intercepted my communications, fed him a narrative of my supposed indifference and preoccupation with work, how she twisted my intentions to Mark, painting me as controlling and dismissive. Mark, his face etched with remorse, filled in the gaps, admitting how easily he'd bought into Mom's manipulations, how her constant little digs about my special bond with Dad had fueled his own resentments. She told me you thought her ideas for a party were tacky, and beneath you, he confessed, looking at me with raw apology in his eyes. She said you were trying to make the rest of us look bad by comparison with your grand university plans. And the part about me not being welcome at your birthday party? Dad, I asked quietly, the words still a fresh wound. Dad's face darkened. Mark told me about that too. After I found your brochure and the truth started coming out. She admitted it, said it in front of me and Mark. That she told you that. I still can't fathom it. Amy, that your own mother. He trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief and pain. Hearing him validate my experience, acknowledge the depth of the cruelty, it was unexpectedly healing. For so long, I'd questioned myself, wondered if I was overreacting, if I was the problem, to know that he saw it. That he understood. It didn't erase the hurt, but it shifted something within me. I left her at the house last night. Dad said, his gaze fixed on the distant shoreline, told her I needed space. Came out here to add a thing, to breathe. 40 years of marriage, Amy, and I feel like I'm seeing her for the first time. This level of deception, of cruelty towards you, it's shaken everything. The unspoken question of their future hung heavy in the air. What do we do now? I asked, the exhaustion of the past week, the past years, finally catching up to me. I think, Dad said, his voice gaining a new resolve, we need to confront her. All three of us, together, no more secrets, no more manipulation. She needs to understand the damage she's done, to you, to me, to our family. Mark nodded, his expression grim but determined, agreed. She can't keep twisting the narrative if we're all there, united. It was strange, this newfound alliance with my brother, forged in the crucible of our mother's betrayal. But it also felt right, like a necessary realignment. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath, we do it together. We decided the confrontation would happen the next day, back at the house. Richard would temporarily move into the small condo he kept near the university campus for late work nights, irrevocably damaged by the deceit. Maybe, Dad said softly, a flicker of his old enthusiasm returning. Maybe just you and I, Amy Bean. We could still do something, smaller, more personal. Perhaps that trip to research the family history in Ireland you once mentioned. The thought, once a desperate alternative, now felt like a lifeline. A quiet act of reclamation, a new legacy, born not of public fanfare, but of private healing and rediscovered connection. The confrontation with my mother the next day was every bit as painful and draining as we'd anticipated. We sat in the formal living room, the three of us, Dad, Mark, and me, a united front of quiet, sorrowful accusation. Eleanor, for the first time I could ever recall, looked small, defeated. At first, she tried denial, then deflection, then tears. But against our combined, unwavering testimony, her defenses crumbled, And then the anger, the resentment, the decades of perceived slights and insecurities poured out of her. You've always been his favorite. She spat at me, all pretense of composure gone, from the day you were born. I was secondary in his life. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch your husband connect with your daughter in ways he never connected with you? To see her achieve things, plan things that you feel you never could. The raw, genuine hurt in her voice was undeniable, even if her actions remained inexcusable. Dad listened, his face a mask of stand sorrow, as he heard. Perhaps for the first time, the depth of the insecurity that had poisoned our family for so long. Carolyn, he said, his voice gentle but firm, why didn't you ever talk to me about this? 39 years of marriage, and you never once expressed feeling this way. Would it have changed anything? She countered, her voice breaking. Would you have loved her less? Been less proud of her accomplishments? That's not how love works. Carolyn, Dad said quietly, it's not a finite resource. Loving Amy never diminished what I felt for you. It was Mark, surprisingly, who bridged the chasm. Mom, he said, his voice surprisingly compassionate, you need help. Professional help? What you did, lying to all of us, turning us against each other, that was cruel. And it has to stop. She didn't deny it. Which, in itself, was a form of progress. By the end of that long, exhausting day, a few things were clear. Eleanor agreed to start therapy. Dad would, indeed, move into his campus condo for a while, creating space for them both. And the grand, public birthday celebration, the scholarship launch, was officially off the table. Instead, Dad and I would plan our quiet trip to Ireland, a journey to trace our roots, a pilgrimage of healing. The weeks that followed were a strange landscape of cautious rebuilding. My relationship with Mark underwent a quiet transformation. The resentment and rivalry that had defined our interactions for years began to dissolve, replaced by a tentative, hesitant understanding. We started having weekly dinners, just the two of us and Chloe, dismantling old misunderstandings, building new, fragile bridges. It turned out, without Mom's constant triangulating, we actually liked each other. Dad, in his little condo, threw himself into researching our Irish ancestry with a newfound vigor, his calls to me filled with excited discoveries about distant Welsh relatives and forgotten townlands. His joy was untainted, a quiet flame burning steadily. Mom's journey was more complex. Therapy was dredging up a lifetime of insecurities. There were no easy fixes, no quick apologies that could erase years of hurt. But there was, for the first time, a willingness to look inward. A year later, on Dad's 61st birthday, there was no grand party, just the five of us. Dad, Mom, Mark, Chloe, and me gathered at Dad's favorite, unpretentious steakhouse. Mom and Dad were back under the same roof, their marriage fundamentally altered, but perhaps, strangely, stronger for having weathered the storm. Weekly family therapy had become monthly, then quarterly. New, healthier patterns of communication were slowly taking root. My relationship with Mom would never be simple or entirely comfortable. The pretense of perfect mother-daughter harmony was gone, replaced by careful, sometimes awkward, but ultimately more authentic respect. We were learning to be honest allies in the messy business of being family. Dad and I had taken our trip to Ireland a few months prior. We'd walked through windswept churchyards, deciphered faded tombstones, and shared pints of Guinness in cozy pubs with newfound cousins who had his eyes. We didn't establish a scholarship fund, but we compiled a beautiful, handwritten family history filled with photos and stories, a different kind of legacy, more personal, more profound. A copy of it now sat on his desk, a quiet testament to our journey. At that steakhouse, as Dad raised his glass for a toast, he didn't speak of grand achievements or public accolades. To truth, he said, his eyes meeting mine. Then Mark's, then Mom's, to healing, and to the understanding that family isn't something we're just given. It's something we choose to build and rebuild together every single day. Through honesty and forgiveness and a love that's strong enough to bear the weight of our imperfections. We clink glasses, the simple sound sealing a complex, unspoken promise. Looking around that table at the flawed, resilient, trying faces of my family, I understood something essential. The scars would always be there, visible in certain lights, tender to certain touches. But scars also meant survival. They meant we had been broken open, and somehow, from that breaking, had come the possibility of something more real, more authentic than we'd ever dared to hope for. It took a long time for the soil of our family to feel fertile again. The scars are there, reminders of a harsh winter. But scars also mean healing has occurred. My father and I, we build our own small monument to his legacy, not with fanfare, but with quiet conversations and shared discovery. It was a different kind of tribute, one born from truth, not pretense. My mother is on her own journey, and perhaps, one day, the roots she almost severed will find a way to graft back, stronger for having faced the blight. Mark and I, we're learning to be siblings again, without the shadows of manipulation. Family ... It's not always the picture-perfect image we're sold. Sometimes it's messy, painful, and requires us to dig deep to find what's real. But when you fight for that truth, when you refuse to be silenced or erased, you find a strength you never knew you possess. You find that your own light is enough. If you've ever felt like your voice was drowned out or your efforts dismissed by those closest to you, please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe in the power of shared experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys of quiet resilience and inner peace. And if you feel moved to support the channel, the super thanks button is always appreciated. Sometimes, giving back is part of our own healing too. Thank you for walking this path with me. May your own journey, however winding, lead you to the truth and the healing you deserve.